There we go. Thank you. So guys, you notice that that thing is not a big piece for mine. That's probably okay. So we have this equation here, those A, B, and C values. So we can set it in there. But like I said, now you have to actually show all of those values that you set it. Okay. Even in core next year, when you do this in grade 11, technically, you get that marked for actually setting in those values. Okay. So now 0 is just 0, so you can actually move this out. But you do still have to have your plus or minus, all right, because it is going to be positive, that's square root, or negative, that's square root. So you have your plus or minus. And what does this become? What's negative 4 times 25? 100 over 2. Okay, does 100 have a square root? Yes, it's 10. Hey, so you can say here that x is plus or minus 10i over 2. Sorry, that line is to be. All right, so you can do it like that, right? If you see that there's a negative in front, you can just think, okay, what's the actual number there is 100. The square root of 100 is 10. Then the square root of negative 1 is going to be I, and then that's over 2. And then what's 10 divided by 2? 5. Plus or minus 5. Like that. Okay, so it's up to you which method you want to use. I'm going to give you guys some more now. So if you didn't think of doing it like this, then you can practice in the next exercise that I'm going to give you. Okay, but does that make sense, guys? Yeah. Those two answers. Okay, number 5 is over there. Again, number 5 is one that could have just factorized. Yes? That's fine. It doesn't matter either. You could have written 1,5 and then for the other one 0,67. It's fine. Yeah. But like I said, if you want to factorize, then you are welcome to do so. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that sometimes you won't be able to. Okay, guys, I'm going to give you 20 minutes, okay, to do the following questions. I'm putting them on the board. This is from the old textbook, all right, which is not according to the new syllabus, but it has some nice exercises. So every now and then I'm going to give you questions from the old textbook instead. What you can do is you can just make a heading. So I wonder now, more quadratic equations or something like that. All right, and then we're just going to do, I would like you to do, obviously start from A and see how far you get, but I would like you to actually get to some of these trinomials, right? So let's say our aim is to get to H at least, but if you manage to get over to that, that's great. Okay, so it's saying they're leaving answers in simplest third form, guys. That just means that if you have like a square root of 25, you have to sorry, that's not a good example. Yes? So this third form just means, yeah, you need to simplify. Sorry, I can't think of an example now. I'll look at these and see if it comes up there. I suppose, yeah. Maybe that's the thing. So guys, I'm just showing you here, you could have used either method of doing the plus minus square root or of factorizing the difference of two squares just for that first one. Okay, guys, are we fine with B, C, and D? Like I said already, if you feel the need to, there's nothing wrong with just putting in an extra step where you say here, for example, x is then plus or minus the square root of -4, which is plus or minus square root of 4 times -1. And then you got to answer that 35. I'm just going to go down to F and then I'll come back up to G. Okay, so we can talk about G and H at the same time. So there you have D, E, and F. So for E and F, you did get fractions, okay, but it's not that bad. So you just do the square root of 4/9 is 2/3, and the square root of -1 is I. Okay, yes. So I have minus 5. Oh, that's fine. Yes, yeah, you could have written something like that.
Then you can simplify the two.
Yes, yeah, you split up that fraction. Okay, guys, are we fine with D, E, and F?
Yeah.
Any questions on those three?
No, I'm going to
Yes? So you, because there's it's the same for this one, because there's one term in the denominator, you can split the fraction out. So you do -6/2 plus or minus 2I/2, and then you simplify to that. So it would be wrong if you just said, okay, I'm going to cancel out this 2 and that 2. You see, but because you're dividing both terms by 2, you cancel. Okay, guys, if we're looking at G over there. So there I have my value in the quadratic formula, and I'm sure that you would probably try and work that out. But if you're just looking at these numbers, you can see that you have 4 minus 20, right? And that's going to be -16. If you don't do that, if you may be rushing in a test or exam, whatever, you try to type that into the calculator, it will come up as a math error. Then you need to think, okay, it's a math error because this is negative, meaning I'm going to have complex roots. Okay, complex solutions, roots of solutions. Okay. So there, I just wrote that with the actual root -16. -2 I left as it is. This, are we okay with this being the same as 4I? The square root of 16 is 4, the square root of -1 is I. Yes. And then guys, you could have put in an extra step like we did in the example on Wednesday, where you now split up this fraction. You do -2/2, which is -1, plus or minus 4I/2, which is 2I. That's what I'm doing here. Next one as well, H, there we go. Same thing, again, you're getting a negative value in your square root. So you're getting 36 minus 40, which is -4. Now guys, I want us to look at all of these answers and just try and identify a pattern here. We're looking at these answers. So in the formula, yeah, it's -1. Okay, guys, in these questions, all of them, you see that we're actually getting the same answer, but each time it's one is positive, the other one is negative, right? For these one-term answers. But then what happens with the answers that have multiple terms? It's -1 plus 2I, and then -1 minus 2I. So the same terms, but the one is positive, the other one is negative, right? We're in between them. Same thing here, -3 plus I, and -3 minus I. Now guys, values that are like that, so it's the same two terms, but you have a different sign in between them. You call conjugate forms. Alright, so we're going to write that down now. I suppose we need to make a new heading for today. What shall we say? Let's just make the heading conjugate pairs.
So on the concept.
Okay, so I'm going to explain quadratic equations. I'm just going to write EQNS for equations. Right, it's been a long week. We don't have time to write the whole word out. Quadratic equations with complex roots, oh my gosh, I can't even speak. With complex roots always have conjugate is as solution. For example, I'm just going to write down a few equations and then their answers, their solutions, so that you can see. So the ones that we just did, we have x squared plus 2x plus 5 equal to 0. Right? When we solved that, that was g that we just solved. We got that x was -1 plus 2i, or x is -1 minus 2i. Okay, so now instead of writing them as one thing, I'm just writing them as the two separate values. And let's just highlight those signs in between the two terms, because that is what makes them conjugate pairs. Okay, the fact that we have the same terms, but we have a different sign in between them. What we did was x squared plus 6x plus 10 equal to 0. And then we got that x is -3 plus I, or -3 minus I. Again, the same two terms, but we just have a plus in between them, and then in the other solution, we have a minus in between them. Then when we had, for example, those first couple of examples that we did, when we had, let's say, x squared plus 36 equal to 0. So guys, we got plus or minus 6i for this answer. All right, but I'm just going to write it slightly differently. I'm going to write it as x equals 0 plus 6i, or x equals 0 minus 6i. You guys agree that 0 plus 6i is the same as 6i?
Yeah.
Right? And 0 minus 6i is the same as -6i. Okay, I'm just writing it as two terms so that you can actually see that these two answers are also conjugate pairs. Now that will always happen when an equation has complex roots. Your two answers are always going to have the same term, but just a plus in between the, in the one solution, there's going to be plus in between them, and then in the other a minus. Does that happen in all quadratic equations? If it has real roots, for example, are you always going to get a +2 and a -2, or a +4 and a -2? Sometimes you can get a 1 and a 7, hey? This is like a normal quadratic equation, a quadratic equation that has real roots. This just happens when your quadratic equation has complex roots. Okay, now we're going to use this knowledge to answer a different type of question. They can ask you, write down an equation with a solution of, for the first one, 5i. Now guys, what I want you to notice is that 5i is a complex number, right? So if 5i is the solution of an equation, that means that negative 5i will also be a solution of that same equation. All right. They will actually usually say write down a quadratic equation, like you said. Maybe we should just add, but now it's an add, so that bothers me a bit. But anyway, it's just sorry for the English lessons in the class. That happened. I could, yes, but I don't know if you guys could. So I'm gonna do that. But some of the people that the rest of you that can't do that. As my grade 8s nearly had a heart attack when I erased the pen the other day. They were like screaming, what is going on? They had never seen this before. Yeah, they were, yeah, they thought it was magic. Hey? Where did I get them? From CNA. If I can find them basically. Okay, guys, so let me just add that as a note on the side. Where is that other pen? If one of the solutions is 5i, then we know that the other solution is also going to be negative 5i. Right? So, how are you going to solve this type of question? And it always comes up in a test for exam. There is another method that I know Mrs. Ford does. I don't really like that method. I can show it to you. Maybe you would like it, but I prefer this one. I'm just going to say, okay, my answer is then going to be x equals plus or minus 5i. Right, that would be the answer to the equation. So we're basically working backwards, right? So far we've done equations and we solved for x. Now we have the answers for x and we need to work backwards. Right, now guys, what is the, how can I say this now? What operation did we do in order to get that plus minus there? We had to square root something, hey? So now we're going to do the opposite. Now we're going to square it back, if that makes sense. So we're actually going to square both sides. So you can show it like that. Okay, so here we're going to get x squared. Now guys, what happens when you square a plus or minus? What is a positive number squared? Positive. What is a negative number squared? Positive. So the plus minus, because remember this was representing two different answers, but it was representing positive or negative. When you are squaring it, it actually just becomes positive. Okay? So when you square this plus minus, it goes away. What's this? What do you get when you square 5? 25. What do you get when you square I squared, which is negative 1. Yes, but let's just write I squared first, but the that is negative 1. Guys, remember that I was the square root of negative 1. Yes, we wrote that down on Wednesday. We're all fine with that. So I squared is the square root of negative 1. Oh, sorry, I squared is the square root of negative 1 squared. And what happens with this square root and that square? They cancel out, right? So this is negative 1. So I squared is negative 1. All right, so next step, 25 times negative 1. Or you can just write negative 25 straight away, but because it's the first example, just write it out properly. So this is negative 25. And now, guys, usually it's best to just have all of your terms on the one side equal to 0 when it's a quadratic equation. So what I just want us to do now is to move this minus 25 over, and it's going to become plus 25 equal to 0. I feel like we might have done that equation before. It was in the homework, yes. All right, so it was in the homework. This one, plus or minus 5i, that was the equation. Okay, so we need to be able to work backwards from the answers, and actually from only one answer, right? Knowing that it will include both, to the original equation. Now guys, in terms of mark allocations, you actually get a mark just for writing this, just for recognizing that if one solution is positive 5i, the other one will be negative 5i. So that is already your first mark for that question. Then you'll get a mark for squaring both sides, a mark for changing this I squared to -1. So either one of these two steps. If I can see that you know that I squared is -1, so you can go straight to -25, or you can show it like that, and then for the final answer. And that would be a 4-mark question. We're going to do one more quickly where it's not just a one term, all right, where you have multiple terms in that answer, because it can get a bit more complicated. So now we are supposed to write down a quadratic equation with a solution of 1 minus 2i. X equals 1 minus 2i. Now we see, okay, 1 minus 2i is a complex solution. So that means that 1 plus 2i is also going to be a solution, right? So that is the first thing that we write, guys. You're going to say x is equal to, excuse me, for squaring both sides. Okay, again, guys, you get a mark for having that knowledge. Okay, for knowing that both answers will be there. Now, before I'm going to square both sides, it's best to actually move this 1 over to the other side. Because, guys, if you square this side now, you see that that's a binomial square. But now it's a bit difficult to do that because, oh no, because there's a plus and there's a minus. It's not even put ourselves through that and of deciding how to square that thing. Okay, we're going to move that 1 across. X minus 1 is equal to plus or minus 2i. And now if we square both sides, it's nice and easy. All right. Again, I'm squaring both sides so that I can get rid of that I actually. And all of the equations that we've solved, there hasn't been an I in the actual equation, right? There's an I in the answer. So to get rid of this I actually, if we square it, it's going to be I squared, which is -1. Okay, so that is actually why we're squaring both sides, to get rid of that I there. So we're going to do x minus 1 squared equals plus or minus 2i squared. And guys, we need to remember that when you are squaring a binomial, you need to do that shortcut, right? X squared, what's the product of the two values? -1 times x is -x, then you double it, all right? -2x plus 1 is equal to, when you square plus minus, it just becomes positive. 2 squared is 4, and I squared is I squared, or you could put that in as -1 straight away. I'm just going to make an arrow here. This is the same as 4 times -1. If you want to do that immediately, that's fine. And now we must just get everything on the one side. Okay, so we have x squared minus 2x. Here we have a plus 1. On this side, we have a -4. Right? So if I move this -4 to the left, it's going to become plus 4. What's 1 plus 4? 5. Equals 0. You can put in some more steps if you wanted to. You could do that as a separate step. You could write -4 as a separate step. You could move it. It's up to you. Okay, whatever makes you guys comfortable. So yeah, these are the 2 types of questions that you can get on quadratic equations with complex roots. Firstly, solving. All right, solve for x. You could practice. And then also, if they're giving you one of the roots, sometimes they'll give you both. It doesn't really change the method, right? Right, the fact that there's a plus minus, it doesn't actually change what you're doing. Okay, but it just, you do actually get a mark just for knowing that the answers will be conjugate.
1 plus. And 1 times negative 1.
I squared is negative 1 there. Not negative 1 times negative 1. Where is it negative 1 times the square? Okay, guys, I actually just want to check if there are some of these in the answer series that you can practice. Not giving any homework over a weekend. That's rude of you. Just take a little quiz here, guys. Wait a second. We haven't done any of these on your own. I just want to give you one of each. I just want to give you one of each. Okay, so the same, you can just number them 3 and 4. All right, you don't have to write the new heading. So number 3 is the same as these ones that we've just done. Okay, I'll just give you one, guys, and you can do it now in the 5 minutes that are left. X equals 4 plus I. Okay, just practice that one. So it's not actually even homework, it's classwork. You will definitely be able to finish it in the time that's left. Yes, basically the term.